Hello,
Hello.
good morning. Welcome to World Fringe Day, interview number one. And we have with us the lovely Kevin from San Diego and Lauren and Heather from Adelaide Fringe. We're
And,
waiting for.
and
Oh,
we got Joe joining
sorry, I
us.
thought it was Lauren.
Yeah,
Joe, morning. Sorry, Joe. We're on Lauren's email, I think.
Yeah.
So how are you and what time is it for both of you? It must be very different for all three of us.
It is 12:30 a.m. here in San Diego, California.
Wow. Happy World Fringe Day.
Happy World Fringe
You
Day.
guys must be nearly a day behind each other.
Yeah, we're at 5:09 p.m. on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Gosh, well, we are a truly international network here, everyone. So why don't you, Heather, start by telling us about your fringe, where, when, what, how, and who?
Yes. Adelaide Fringe happens in South Australia, and we've been going now for 59 years. Well, coming up 59 years, and we happen in the summertime in beautiful Adelaide. Adelaide's a pretty small city, really, so we're able to pretty much take over the whole town and transform all the parklands and hundreds of venues. We have around about 450 venues, and we go for an entire month. And it's usually beautiful and sunny and warm in the day, and late at night it doesn't get too cold either. So we see thousands of people still after the shows, lingering around, enjoying a drink out in the under the stars and under the trees. We had about 1,200 shows in the Fringe this year.
Amazing.
And amazing. And this is Joe, who's the head of artist services and venues and events.
Hi.
And Joe's the one who is right now. In fact, venue registrations open right now for Adelaide. So Joe is already fielding tons and tons of phone calls from and her team from artists and venues who are gearing up to register for next year. We are always, every year, the easiest thing to remember is that we go from mid-February to mid-March.
Yes.
The start date might change a couple of days here and there, but we're always mid-Feb to mid-March, coming out after Perth and before the Melbourne Comedy Festival. And I have a little chart about our tickets, which I thought might be interesting for people, just if you haven't been to Adelaide Fringe before, or if you have and you haven't been for a few years. This chart just shows you sort of going on in our ticket sales in the last 6 years, and it really shows that the audiences are growing exponentially at Adelaide Fringe, which is good news. But we're working hard to make sure that that thing keeps on going off the thing, because our number one focus is bums on seats and full houses for artists if we can get them.
Yeah, totally. That's amazing. I did notice that you're in your report that your ticket sales have just gone, like, especially in the last few years, have just gone through the roof, which is amazing.
Think that the fact that the Adelaide Fringe has been going for more than 50 years, I think, has got a lot to do with it as well, because as people get older, they don't leave the Fringe. They still keep coming, but then the new generations join us.
Yeah.
We have 70-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and, everything in between.
Amazing. Kevin, tell us about your Fringe.
Yes, but before I do, I think we should check, because I saw a notification saying that Gareth joined the group, but I don't see him here.
Right, I will try and find him.
You need to turn your microphone up, Kevin, just a fraction.
Well, I don't know if I can. It's as loud as it will go.
You just have to shout.
Just got to shout.
Oh.
Right, keep talking though. So we're going to try and get.
So as you try to get him, I'll go over our festival. Our festival is the opposite end of the spectrum of Adelaide, in the sense that we are a much smaller festival, and for us, we're only 6 years old. And since we are still a young festival, it's in our best interest to keep things small. We've had the interest for artists to participate where it could be hundreds of artists, but we would be doing them a disservice by letting the festival grow too fast. Adelaide is perfect for what it is and being so old. For us, and I think it completely makes sense, we have to keep things contained. And one thing that we do is have Fringe managed venues, and this is going along the Canadian Association of Fringe Festivals as our main model. While we are based in San Diego in the United States, and we are also in Tijuana, Mexico, we're a binational festival, we still have CAF as our main model because we're members of the Canadian Association. And by having the Fringe managed venues, we make it way easy for artists participating. So people coming from other countries, they don't have to worry about finding a venue because we have the Fringe managed venue.
Yeah,
Cool. Technicians. And we also provide billeting, which is housing. And for us, that Canadian format has worked really well. And then, of course, we also have BYOVs, which is bring your own venues. And people are more than welcome, if they don't make it into our Fringe managed venues, to go ahead and bring their own venue. But we found at this age, not too many people jump in to do their own venues. Why are you smiling so much, Holly?
Why am I smiling so much? I'm just happy to see you all.
It's delighted to see you.
Okay?
See you.
It was like a shitty smile. I was like, oh, that's a sneaky looking smile.
No, it's not. It's not. So I've got this theory that kind of Fringe people are a kind of tribe and of a type. And I was just wondering if, you know, why, like Heather and Joe, why you got into Fringe in the first place and what drew you to it?
Well, I think the open access nature of the Fringe Festival means that sort of anything goes, and it brings a vibrancy that I think is really interesting. You know, it's kind of grassroots, it's ground level, it's open to everyone, and it speaks for everyone. And I think that's one of the things that I find most exciting about Fringes as a kind of ideology is that everyone can take part, and the audience is so much a part of it as well.
Yeah, totally. Hey, I've just noticed that Gareth, you've arrived. Welcome. How are you? We've just gone through talking about what our Fringes are about, where they are, when they are, etc. Would you like to tell us about your Fringe?
Sure. Well, we're the Fringe of the Fringe.
Oh.
I'm in Dunedin, which is a city in southern New Zealand. So I think we are the southernmost Fringe festival in the world. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we're in March. We're an open access Fringe. We had 90 independent artist events this year, which was a great turnout. Makes us the second biggest Fringe in New Zealand. So we like to think of ourselves as boutique, but we're small but perfectly formed.
Yeah, sounds amazing. And what drew you? Who started the Fringe Festival there, and what drew you to it?
Dunedin's a really strong city. Really punches above its weight in terms of culture. So we're a UNESCO City of Literature, and Dunedin Fringe was set up on the year 2000. And initially, it sort of followed the Edinburgh model of being a fringe of an arts festival. But since 2006, it's been annual, standalone, at a separate time of the year than the arts festival. So yeah, it's always had quite a strong counterculture, artsy type community. It's a great city for making art in. You know, it's a university town. It's got lots of warehouse spaces. You know, in the 80s, it was renowned for the Dunedin sound, a particular style of music and things. So it's just a great city to live in and make art in.
Yeah, sounds amazing. And so do you get lots of local work, or is it international, or both, or how does that work?
We quite like the fact that we are a Fringe for our locals. Some of the bigger fringes, of course, get inundated with visitors, and that creates perhaps a certain tension between the locals and the visitors. We have about 40% representation of locals, probably about 45 from other parts of New Zealand, particularly Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch. And then we have some lovely internationals that come visit us, but we're always keen to have more.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
50% internationals.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds brilliant.
I'll just throw in, we're part of that circuit, so you can go to the biggest Australian fringes, Perth and Adelaide, and then travel on through New Zealand to Auckland, Wellington, Dunedin. And then obviously it's a long way to come, but if you can tap into that circuit, then it really makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, well, it's a long way to come for some people, but it sounds like once you get there, it's fully worth it because you can get so much out of that, and you get to tour Australia and New Zealand. What could
Absolutely.
Be
go make your money in Perth and Adelaide, and then come for a good time.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Kevin, I feel like we were with you at the conception of your Fringe Festival, or the early days. What drew you to wanting to build such a thing and start your amazing Fringe off?
I think that one of the big things was that for us in our city, there's a big focus on the established arts. So it would be, we have a couple different major venues, regional theaters, that will start shows for Broadway. But there's not that many venues that are small venues that can facilitate new works, and that smaller theater companies are able to utilize. I mean, we have a deficit in that area. So by starting the Fringe, all of a sudden we've created opportunities for those artists that otherwise didn't exist. So we're filling a niche in our city, but in turn, we're also seeing a surge of theater companies. All of a sudden, there's all these new companies, and we can attribute a lot of that to the Fringe because we've provided this new platform for artists in our city. It's just an incredible thing to see. I would say the biggest driving force has been filling that niche, and then also being inspired by festivals like Adelaide, and being inspired by Edinburgh. My first Fringe festival ever was Edinburgh in 2012, which is when I met you guys. Well, that was really effing scary to think, oh my God, how are we supposed to do this? But anybody that's experienced other Fringe festivals knows it doesn't have to be this ginormous thing. The main thing is making sure that we have a festival that's open and uncensored and unjuried, and then magic happens. And I think that I'm one of the most traveled producers I know of, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I still am. And,
no, you've definitely been to the most fringes in the world. I think you're the most prolific fringe hopper that I've ever met.
What I would turn around and say, and I really mean this, is I've never been to a Fringe festival that I didn't like. Every festival has its own character and its own pros and cons, but they all have the positive that goes beyond anything.
Cool, totally. Thank you. That's true, and I actually think when you say about why you started the Fringe, I think that will be a common thread throughout the day. With it, kind of, they seem to fill a void where there is nothing for artists. Heather, I was just wondering, why would you say that Fringe festivals are important? What do they do for the culture of the world?
Well, I think they're really critical they're a launch pad for so many artists to experiment and to try out new shows, and for people to put their toe in the water when they've never had an opportunity where you've got curated festivals and curated venues throughout the world and throughout the year. it's the opportunities are so limited, and they are going to go for things that have already been tried and tested. And where on earth are artists going to try and test so many things and shows and different, even different nuances within their own career, and maybe take a slightly different direction? And I think that Fringes have become that, that sort of more experimental playground. But it's also audiences who might not normally take a risk, and they're generally a little bit more affordable, the shows in Fringe. People who might think arts isn't really for them, and the barrier is a little bit lower, and they think, well, I can go to the Fringe, but I wouldn't go to the major festival theatre down the road or something. So I think we're training audiences as well as helping launch artists. And one thing that we've really found increasingly important in Adelaide Fringe is the honeypot, which is behind the scene. And again, that's more about opportunities for launching off into other tours and other bookings. And I mean, we started the honeypot, about 10 years ago. And what it is a behind the scenes kind of marketplace, a place where all sorts of programmers from around Australia and the world, festival programmers, venue programmers, all sorts of people, they come to Adelaide Fringe and they use it as a place to scout for shows and scout for artists. And we know that hundreds of bookings have come out of, say, the honeypot from this year. And pretty much every year now we're finding that, dozens and dozens of bookings are coming out of the honeypot. And what that means is not only is the artist being able to use the Fringe to find, test out new material or try find new audiences, but they're also being able to get some certainty for the future touring of their show, rather than jumping from one festival to the other and then wondering where they're going next. And so a lot of touring stuff is now a reason that's happening behind the scenes, Adelaide Fringe, for example.
Yeah, amazing. I agree with all of that, particularly the bit about kind of training audiences as well. I think that's really important, and that's a real big thing that a Fringe definitely can and does do. We're going to find
more about audiences repeating, more and more shows, like trying to understand how many shows do they go to. And I think that's going to be really important as well, because people they don't just come and go to one show. They actually, take time off and go to loads of shows. And that's an interesting phenomenon about Fringe festivals as well.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely agree. We're going to have to sign off in a minute. So I was just going to ask you all to say, I know we've only got kind of 15 minutes per thing, per broadcast. So I was wondering, Gareth, do you want to say, let's say some last words before we sign off from each of you. Gareth, go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm just happy with Fringe Day, everyone, from the Fringiest Fringe. And thank you so much for inviting me to be part of it, Holly. I will promise to travel and get around and meet you all in due course. So I look forward to seeing you in person one day.
Yeah, thanks.
Will you be with us at the Congress next month?
I won't be able to, unfortunately. It's really hard to travel from where I am, but targeting 2019.
Kevin, any last words?
Yeah, I will echo Gareth with first of all, it's nice to meet you. I haven't met you.
No.
But I would echo Gareth in saying Happy World Fringe Day. I feel so fortunate to have producer friends around the world, and what it makes me realize is all of us knowing each other are able to create more and more opportunities for artists. It makes it that much more exciting for me what we're doing. I will say this, that we've given out 2 awards, one to send an artist to New Zealand Fringe, and then another to send an artist to Sydney Fringe, and we want to keep that up with adding cities. So it's very exciting.
That's brilliant. Good. Lucky them.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, go ahead, Adelaide.
Happy World Fringe Day. Thank you for including us. Big World Fringe Day from the largest Fringe Festival in the Southern Hemisphere. It's great to be a part of this. Thank you for including us. And we hope to see you in Adelaide in 2019. Come on down under.
Yeah.
And we'll see you in Edinburgh.
Yeah, we'll see you in Edinburgh.
See you in Edinburgh.
And for those of you who are going to bed now, Kevin, you're going to bed now. We'll still be here doing this when you wake up in the morning. So, yeah. So, you know, come back and say hi at any time. It's lovely to meet you, Gareth. Lovely to see you, Kevin, Joe, and Heather. And we'll see you very soon. Happy World Fringe Day.
Happy World Fringe Day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Happy Day all.
Bye.